Okay, Sammy asks about ground pressures. Well, okay, so what are the basic ground pressures? Basically, you've got, well, I guess three main kind of ground pressures. You've got your up and down kind of ground pressures, you know, the up, the loading, down, you know, pushing up and pushing down. And this sort of, a lot of the modern players, you see them really pushing up, going through the shot, loading down. Okay, so you've got this kind of vertical ground pressures. Then you've got your lateral ground pressures, which really has to do with shifting weight over to the right foot, into the left foot. So you've got this, and then depending on what kind of stance you're using, how flat your swing is, these things can start to get a little diagonal. So as Hogan would have more of a little bit of a diagonal motion in the lateral movement as he moved from the right heel out to the ball of the left foot, coming into the strike and into the free ride down and that sort of thing. We go into that extensively in the advanced ball striking class, and I'm coming out with a whole thing on Hogan modules. It should be out in a few months. Okay, so we've got that. We've got up and down. We've got back and forth for weight transfer. But one kind of ground pressure that's not really talked about a lot is the rotational pressures. So if I'm swinging very flat, then these pressures are going this way in my feet. I've got resistance pressures happening here, and this is the kind of thing where you would see, you know, Greg Norman when he was in his prime, and you'd see his foot slide back like this, and you know he went in. Somebody told him, "Oh, that's no good. You know, you can't do that," and you know, kind of never really played as well after that. In my opinion, I think he probably agreed. Played his best golf when he was doing it wrong, right, with a foot was moving back. You'll see that with George Knudsen's foot move back. You watch Lee Trevino, a lot of the classic swings, you would have that. So these rotational pressures in the feet have come more into play as the swing gets flatter. So the more you're swinging around like this, you've got your feet, you know, wanting to do this more. And flatter swings, well, in my opinion, big advantage if you got flat lie angles and you're working the club on the 430 line, coming in flat, working left and around, and you're going to have these pressures in the feet, these rotational pressures. So it's good to be aware of these things and to know what you want to do. So there's lots of combinations here, whether you've got narrow stances, wide stances. Wide stances are going to facilitate greater weight transfer. So you see a lot of the great ball strikers. I think the majority of the great ball strikers had wider stances. Trevino certainly did. Hogan did. Norman did. George Knudsen did. Some of my favorite guys. With the wider stances, wider stance allows for more lateral pressure, allows for a little more time to keep the shoulders and torso closed as you're coming down. It's pushing off the right foot on the downswing. It delays the acceleration through the strike, so that's the advantages. Mac O'Grady, Morad guys like the narrow stance, and they're more kind of the turn in the barrel kind of thing. You know, not as much movement, all about this line and keeping everything really centered, and you know, makes sense. You know, there's a logic to that, but it has, in my opinion, it has its flaws and it has its disadvantages, and that's why I don't do it. But anyway, so as far as the ground pressures, yes, to facilitate that, I mean, you're going to have a downward going back, you're going to press into the ground, and you're flexing the knees into the downswing so that you can save the rotation of the torso. If you don't do that, then you got to start the club down somehow, and you're going to do it with your hands or your arms or opening the shoulders too soon. You see that in the modern swings a lot. Everybody's just turning really open, really quick. But the really great ball strikers were very late, especially when you watch Hogan. I mean, you'll notice that rotation stays closed coming down, and then at the last minute it accelerates and starts opening up, and you see the hips moving through the strike. You watch Hogan and you see those hips move and they're opening through the strike. You don't see the hips moving backwards and all this kind of thing that's going on now. And the ball striking, in my opinion, isn't as good. So that's kind of my thought on ground pressures. First, to understand what they are, and then understand whether or not this is an intention or just a vapor trail. I mean, if you see the foot doing something like this, well, what's causing that, right? So is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that's kind of what we teach and cover. It's a lot to go into right here, but that's essentially the Cliff Notes version of ground pressures. We'll see you at the next question.